Hey, what's up? It's Jared with Ditch Auto, and I realized something today. I've been shooting with this camera for a little over a year now. This is the Sony a7R II. It is Sony's top-of-the-line performer as far as their mirrorless line goes, and it came out and started shipping in early August of 2015. So I upgraded to this camera right away when it came out. My first Sony, when I was switching over, was a Sony a7S. I got a Sony a7 II, and I realized I needed something a little more powerful. Sony updated their a7R to the a7R II, so here we are with this camera. And what I have here on the table with me is their G Master line of lenses, the three lenses that are currently out: a 24-70 2.8, a 70-200 2.8, and an 85mm 1.4. So these are all full frame lenses. This is a full frame mirrorless camera. So in my opinion, this would be a direct competitor with the new Canon 5D Mark IV. You could say that it was a direct competitor with the Canon 5D Mark III, but this camera really had a lot more going for it than the Canon 5D Mark III. Recent additions and upgrades announced for the Canon 5D Mark IV has put it more in play with this camera and what this camera has to offer. So yes, this is a mirrorless camera. Canon 5D Mark IV, Mark III, and the Nikon equivalents are not mirrorless cameras, but nonetheless, they all play in the same. They all play on the same field as far as what we're all using them for. So over the last year, I've used this camera to shoot weddings, corporate events. I've shot, engagement sessions. I've shot high school senior portraits. I've shot 2 sports teams. I've shot school sports photos for a couple of different seasons. And so I've really used this camera a lot over the last year for a lot of different things. I've shot just photos. I've shot HD video. I've shot 4K video with this camera. I've basically used everything that this camera has to offer, and it's just been a fantastic camera over the last year. Now, when I first switched over to Sony, a lot of the feedback that I got from other people was, yeah, but it's, is it a reliable system? Are you going to have issues with the camera? Over this last year, I've seen a lot of people go to YouTube and the internet to complain about the performance of this camera over the long haul and for Sony support and all of that stuff. And I've had 0 problems since switching over to Sony. Now, I take really good care of my equipment. I pay for this equipment by myself with my own money that I've earned, and so I take excellent care of this equipment. And not to say that other photographers don't take care of their equipment, but I've shot with other people and I see how they treat their equipment, and I would understand why people would need more support than a person like me based on the way that they treat their equipment. So I treat my equipment very well, take care of it really well, and it lasts a long time for me. And this camera being a year old, it's just been a fantastic tool for me. And when I got this camera, these lenses didn't exist. I was shooting on other Sony lenses, and as Sony has released these G Master lenses, I've began to pair these G Master lenses with my a7R II. So let's talk a little bit more about the a7R II and what it does. Now, this camera shoots extremely high resolution photos, and that to me was a major shift because I was used to shooting more recently with the a7 II, which is not, it shoots a decent sized photo, but not as huge of a photo as this camera. And prior to that, I was shooting with the Canon 5D Mark III, which shoots a pretty good size image, but nothing near the size of the image that this camera shoots. Now, those are huge files, and typically for what I'm doing, my clients don't end up needing files that huge. So it is nice to be able to shoot at that resolution, but not every time do you need to be shooting at that resolution all the time because those image files are huge, and when you shoot a couple hundred or a couple thousand images, and they are huge files, you start to have to buy more storage. Storage becomes an issue. And then even delivering those images to my clients, that also becomes an issue because I have to look at different mediums or delivering them a smaller resolution file than what I captured. But what it does give me shooting large files is the ability to crop in a lot. And when you're shooting on a camera that has just a much larger image that it produces, you have that ability. You have that ability to shoot a large image with your subjects in the middle, and then you have lots of room to crop. It's the same argument that can be made for filming in 4K when you're actually going to be editing in 1080p. Having all of that extra resolution is fantastic. And a lot of people have been complaining about Canon's recent announcements with making the 5D Mark IV only 30 megapixels. 30 megapixels, in my opinion, is still a lot of megapixels. And as far as a deliverable goes, what you're giving to your client, that's a lot. That's a huge file that they're probably never going to need. But as a creator, as a photographer, it gives me more real estate, and shooting, the bigger the image that you can get without having issues that come along with cameras that shoot at that high resolution, you want that. You want more, more to work with. Same reason that I was an early adopter of shooting in 4K, even though even today I'm still mostly delivering 1080p footage to my clients. Shooting 4K a lot of times gives me a lot more to work with. I've grown to really like the body of this camera. The a7R II was one of the first cameras to go to a slightly beefier body. The a7 II got a slightly bigger body than what Sony started out with these mirrorless cameras. And the a7R II went to the slightly bigger body as well. It gives you more to hold on to. I added the battery grip almost immediately because the batteries are a little small in these cameras, and so you want that extra battery life. But for me, I also want more to hold on to. As you can see, the width of my hand takes up the entire camera and the battery grip, so it makes it a lot more comfortable for me to hold on to over a long period of time. Plus, being able to go up into portrait to shoot portraits and have a shutter here and a few of my custom buttons here is really nice as well. It's a great addition, and I don't see a lot of people that are shooting Sony going out and getting the battery grip. I think the battery grip is almost a must for me. So, as an example, if I shoot a wedding and I'm only shooting photos, I can go an entire wedding on the 2 batteries in my camera here. So I put two batteries in my camera, and I can shoot around 2,000, 2,500 images and not have to change the battery. And that's even with a speed light. Not that the camera powers an external flash that mounts to the hot shoe, but it is sending a signal to it. And so even with all of that, I'm able to get through an entire wedding on the 2 batteries that are inside the camera, which is great. Now, shooting video is a different story. If you're shooting video, you're definitely going to burn through batteries a lot faster. However, this couple weekends ago, I shot a wedding, shot video the entire day, and I was shooting in 4K the entire day, and I was able to get through the entire day on 3 batteries, shooting with this camera as you see it configured here with this lens and the battery grip. So 3 batteries technically, even though the camera holds 2 at a time. I swapped them out for 2 others and only exhausted 1 of the 2 batteries that are in the camera. So it doesn't do too bad. A lot of people say, oh, well, the batteries are so tiny on these Sony cameras. Sony has gotten really good at power management in these cameras. As some of the firmware updates have came out over time, it's gotten even better, and I'm able to, really get a lot of use out of these cameras on a single battery or 2 batteries. So some of the things that have really kind of stuck out to me with this camera, I have completely changed my daily habits as a photographer because of having Wi-Fi and NFC in my camera. Now, this is one of the reasons that I switched to Sony in the first place, is having Wi-Fi and NFC in the camera. Throughout the day, if I'm shooting an event or a wedding or something like that, I'm able to take photos right off of my camera wirelessly to my phone. And on the Sonys, it's very easy to do that. And we'll see how easy it is to do that after Canon has the 5D Mark IV come out. Maybe there will be some updates to their app, and it'll be a little bit more friendly of an experience. In my past experience with wireless transmission and Canon, it's definitely been a more time-consuming process than actually taking your card out and putting it in a computer. So throughout the day, I will actually transfer photos to my phone and post them, or whatever the the job calls for, I can make use of that. Corporate events that I'm shooting, a lot of times they have social media teams. I'm actually able to take photos and text message them or transfer them through like AirDrop on an iPhone, from iPhone to iPhone, almost in real time. I can take photos just directly off and transmit them over to them, and then they can share those photos, nice photos that I took with this camera, and then they're able to put those photos out right away, which is fantastic. It takes a lot of equipment to pull that off with what's been traditional, and so having that Wi-Fi and that NFC inside of this camera has just completely changed the way I am as a photographer and the way I'm able to deliver photos to my clients and to the rest of the world when I'm working on my own projects. So that's completely different as well. Now, the video capabilities of this camera are fantastic as well. Like, I used to think, well, I'm going to need a Sony that's really good in low light, like the a7S, so to shoot video with, but that only shoots a 12 megapixel image, so I can't use that as my photography camera, so I'm going to have to get another camera for photography. Now, they've made changes, and then with this a7R II, it performs really well in low light, not as good as the a7S II, but it performs amazing in low light, and also takes really high resolution images. And so it's the best of both worlds, so long as that you don't need a camera that can do as well in low light as the a7S or the a7S II. All right, so lastly, I wanted to touch on the customization of this camera. Now, one of the things that I never really got too much into with my Canon was customization, because sure, there's a lot of buttons that are on the camera, but there weren't a whole lot of custom buttons. I was able to remap buttons and change their functionality, but Sony gives you a lot of custom buttons where you can actually set those buttons up to do specific things. And I've really taken off with that. I didn't really dip into it too much with Canon, simply because of the way that camera is. And but with Sony, I was able to really customize my camera and make buttons do what I needed them to do. All of us have different ways that we shoot, different idiosyncrasies when it comes to that stuff. We like having certain settings more readily available. And with Sony having 2 custom buttons up top, 2 custom buttons on the back, and then other options that are blank that I can map to something, such as the bottom button on the rocker switch. There's just a lot of customization on these Sony cameras. The only thing that is a frustration to me with Sony and pretty much all cameras in general is when you go from photo to video mode, it changes your settings. Or it doesn't change your settings, I guess you could say. So for example, if I'm shooting photos, I'm probably shooting at 1/160th or 1/200th of a second at a wider aperture and a lower ISO. But if I'm shooting video, I'm probably shooting at 1/60th or 1/80th of a second, because I want that shutter speed to be a little bit different, because you don't shoot with the same shutter speed when you're shooting video as you do with photos. So when I go from video to photo mode, it doesn't keep whatever settings I was using in those modes. So in video mode, it would be great to keep my video mode settings, and then when I switch to photo mode, it switches my settings back to where I would have them for photo. That's what makes shooting hybrid with a single camera very challenging. It's hard as a photographer or a video, when you're shooting photo and video, to go from one to the other, because you have settings you have to think about too. Now, if all you were doing was shooting in auto, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you were shooting in auto, your camera definitely wouldn't go down to 1/80th or 1/60th of a second. In video, it would just keep your shutter speed high, especially if you're outdoors. So for me, it's a setting. It's something that I feel needs to be fixed in cameras. If you're going to be a hybrid shooter and you're thinking to yourself, what's the best camera that I could get for photo and video? This camera is definitely a contender for that, as will be the Canon 5D Mark IV and the equivalent in Nikon. But it's very hard to hybrid shoot, to switch back and forth between photo and video when you also then have to change all of your camera settings. And then when you want to go back to photo, once again, change back all of your camera settings. And if you're trying to do that periodically throughout the day, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, and it's actually easier just to carry 2 camera bodies on you with 2 lenses and have one setup for video and one setup for photo. So nonetheless, we're not completely there yet to having a solution that is fully hybrid, that makes it, the camera itself gets out of the way and lets you shoot photo or video. But that's kind of, I'm digressing on that because that's just a personal frustration, not a reflection of the camera in and of itself. So as you can see, these cameras are extremely small, they're extremely lightweight. Paired with some of the lenses that are coming out these days, it's getting to be a heavier system. So if you're thinking about, why would I switch, or is it a valid upgrade, or whatever thought process might be going through your head as to why you landed on this video, here are my arguments. This is a great camera. It's an amazing camera. And if it came out today and not a year ago, it would still be an amazing camera. It would still be leading edge technology. This camera is a year old, and it was bleeding edge, and it's still leading edge technology. One can argue that the Canon 5D Mark IV has a few new little bells and whistles in it, but this camera is still going to stand strong and trump the 5D Mark IV in many areas. Not only just resolution, but I guarantee you ISO performance is going to be better on this camera than the 5D Mark IV. So when you're thinking about, do I buy this camera, which is now a year old? Sony has some delays going on right now. There is no known date as to when the next version of this camera is going to come out, or whether or not they're going to refresh it this year anyways. So if I was deciding to buy another Sony right now, it would definitely be this camera, because this camera is just so versatile and amazing at doing so many things. The autofocus is great. Everything about this camera for this last year that I've been using it has been fantastic. So if you're looking to compare specs, I'm sorry I didn't really get into those. You can dive into the specs by looking at them on B&H Photo, or I have the Amazon link down for you below so you can check that out. But as far as a performer, this camera has been amazing. It has met and exceeded every thought or desire that I would have had for it, including with some of the Sony lenses that have came out over the past year. So if you have any questions about this camera, I'd love to answer them for you. In the comment section below, you can ask them. I'll do my best to answer them. Links are in the description below to this camera and these lenses should you want to check them out. And I also have another video that will be coming out soon where I talk about this kind of Sony Pro package here, which is the a7R II and the G Master lenses. So thanks so much for checking out this video here on Ditch Auto. We hope that you subscribe if you like this video so that you can be notified of our future videos. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.